Hi, everybody. Harvey Dix here from Memories Plus Home Healthcare. And today I'm really pleased to introduce an old buddy of mine, Greg Barnsdale, who we actually grew up together. So we go back a long ways. I'm not gonna age myself by telling you how many decades, but a lot. Greg has a very varied background. He started out as an undertaker and funeral director, a pre-planning expert, moved into financial planning. He's a certified executor advisor, a death doula, an author of a best-selling book, Do Not Ignore Your Mortality, which I love. And most recently, after publishing the book, was diagnosed with a brain tumor and really kind of puts things together that his message he's living the message that he's sending out there. And we want to talk today a little bit about the importance of communication, will and estate planning, powers of attorneys, leaving a legacy, a lot of great information. I think we're going to run out of time. We have so much information, but we're gonna dive right in. Greg, welcome, and
Thank you.
tell me a bit about your journey and what compelled you to write the book.
Well, it was really out of frustration, Harvey. As you know, when we left high school many, many years ago, I went to Humber College in Toronto and became a funeral director. And I've worked for large and small funeral homes, but I saw rather quickly that the situations where there was planning done and the deceased had communicated with their family about what they wanted to have happen and planned for it, the situation with the surviving family members was just so much easier on them, as opposed to the majority of situations where there was no planning done, very little communication, and the family were quite often in a lot of turmoil trying to get through the situation of that death within their family. And that combined with what I'd seen in the financial planning industry, where a lot of people just didn't really want to talk about the bad things that could ruin a good retirement. That's what drove me to write this book.
Wow, sounds like you really picked up on that early on in your career, and you kind of went down that path.
Yeah, I did, and that's what ultimately sparked my interest in becoming part of a pre-planning team, where we would go out into the community and actually it evolved into seminars with lawyers and accountants and social workers and so on, and nurses and PSWs and those types of people that would see the situations on the front lines as well, where we were trying to convince people that proactive planning had all kinds of benefits.
Sure. Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a lot less stress for everybody in the end, right?
It is. And actually what I've learned since I published this book 2 years ago is that I've boiled my core message down to this, is that proactive end of life planning helps reduce the stress of aging. It tends to leave survivors more financially and emotionally resilient. It tends to leave them in a place where they are more likely to get along and less likely to contest final wishes. It
Mm.
naturally results in more meaningful legacies. It often helps charities because of the tax planning benefits of planned giving and takes immense pressure off the courts from otherwise dealing with so many unorganized estates. And all these things help the economy.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. I've never heard that twist on things, actually helping the economy. Not only does it help the families, the individuals involved, but the economy as well. And I guess, I could shed the same light on what we do, the home healthcare side of things, keeping people healthy and comfortable in their own home and out of the hospital system, out of the long-term care system that is so bottlenecked these days with wait lists as long as your arm. So it's in a way that I mean that you could say that that's certainly helping the system as well. So that's great. I really like that version of it, that way of looking at it. So why, obviously communication is really important. it's key in all of this. What's the first step in starting that dialogue?
Really, having the courage to talk about these things, Harvey, when minds are clear and time is plentiful. And that's really the solution to all of this. Because if we don't have the courage to talk with our family about what we want to have happen, and the other people out there that are willing to help us and wanting to help us organize these things, like a good financial planner, a good lawyer, the healthcare team, etc. If we have that courage to have these conversations when time is plentiful and minds are clear, those are the best times to actually have the conversations, as opposed to putting them off, because we just don't know what the future holds for any of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know that firsthand, right?
I do. Who would have known that I was spending all this time creating the best book that I could have, and it was the first book that I ever wrote? Who would have known that during all that time I had a brain tumor, a large brain tumor growing within my skull? I had no idea.
Hmm. Hmm. That's powerful. Um, so your background as a financial planner has also helped a lot as well. I'm sure you've seen quite a bit in your journey there of people that needed assistance in all aspects.
Yes. And what I noticed when I first left the funeral industry, and I'm still a funeral director today, but when
Right.
I left that industry and joined the financial planning industry, I saw this general hesitancy by many people not wanting to discuss the bad sorts of things that could ruin a good retirement, such as incapacity or a death. They were Some were much more interested in just discussing and reviewing their investments, as opposed to taking a holistic, broader view at their situation.
Yeah, that's incredible that you can do that because a lot of financial planners really are focused on just the investment side of things. So looking at it from a bigger perspective is really important.
It is. And I believe, and I've had other people agree with this too, Harvey, is that there are a fair number of financial advisors who are uncomfortable discussing these sorts of things. And I think and I get it. I understand that it is not easy to discuss such sour and negative things, but I think we have to be real in the sense that any of us could be incapacitated at any time. Any of us could have a big scar down the side of their head, or a heart attack or a stroke. And we talked about what you had felt uh, not long ago too.
Mhm.
And our health can change in an instant like that. But if we
Mhm.
if we if we have the courage to face these things and communicate with our family and properly plan based on the jurisdictional rules of where we live, and lean into this and know what our options are, we're far better off doing that.
Right, right. So what is the most important part, or how do you start that conversation? Um, and I guess I have several questions, and I know we've had some of our followers send some questions in, so I want to touch on those as well. But how frequently should you update your will? Is one question that came in, and I thought that was a pretty good question.
Well, the old rule of thumb, Harvey, used to be updating it every 5 years, but now
Was it?
more and more people are setting up their will electronically. So it could easily be done more frequently, which is recommended. But
Okay.
that's one of the topics I wanted to be transparent about in my book. What is the difference between setting up a will online for maybe a few $100s compared to seeing a lawyer and spending much more to have a will prepared? But it basically boils down to this: you get what you pay for,
Yeah,
right? But if
always is.
always, yes. Online will platforms are can be very practical for very straightforward situations. But if someone is paying any type of child support or spousal support, Well, that situation is therefore more complex, and they should be seeing an estate planning lawyer. If
Okay.
someone owns property outside of their jurisdiction, or if they own any part of a business, or if they have any types of unique wishes that they want within their planning, they should be seeing a lawyer.
Okay. Okay. Good information. And there's lots of great will and estate lawyers out there that can help people. So um, yeah, please do that, folks. What tell me a bit about what a certified executor advisor is. I'm not familiar with that.
Yes. Well, the Canadian Institute of Certified Executor Advisors now has over 1,500 CEAs across Canada, and the professional designation has recently been launched in the US as well. But being a certified executor advisor as I am, I have taken their course. I helped write part of the course actually. But a certified executor advisor still works in their own capacity, whether it's in the legal field or accounting or financial. But the course provides them with a broad, general understanding of what all of the other professions can help with,
Okay.
ultimately as they help the executor settling the estate. So it gives
Okay.
them really good knowledge of overall all these different professions and how they can help the executor. So they can be
Okay.
very
Yeah.
proficient at making a referral and helping executors avoid potential landmines as they settle the estate.
Right. So that sounds like an amazing service. Um, the executor is usually a family member or a close friend, I guess, that you trust. Can you tell us a bit about that role and what that means?
Yes. An executor or the female version, executrix, or
Oh,
even an
okay.
administrator of the estate, which is appointed by the court in situations where there is no valid will. That role of settling the estate is getting more challenging all the time because most jurisdictions across Canada and the US, and I'm sure in other countries too, Harvey, are continually raising the bar as to what the responsibilities are for the executor, as I'll generally refer to it as.
Sure.
But that role includes so many different things. And many people, as I stress within my book, tend to have accepted that type of role without really knowing what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
And quite often, if the level of communication by the testator, the person who is setting up their affairs and setting up their will and so on, if the level of communication has not been open and transparent and so on, and the person just accepts that role, kind of like being asked to be a best man at a wedding without knowing what they're getting into, they can be in, they can end up regretting it in some
Mm.
cases.
The executor is generally a paid role, is it not?
It is. Some people opt not to take any compensation, but
Yeah.
they are entitled to be paid. And
Okay.
actually, an increasing number of people, testators, are actually including a provision within their will that they allow for the testator to be paid. In my mind, they should be. It can be a
Hmm.
very challenging role.
Hmm. Hmm. So what happens if somebody dies without a will in the first place?
Well, that's when the court, that based on where the person lived, the jurisdictional rules therefore apply if somebody does not have a valid will, and it's referred to as dying intestate.
Okay. Okay. Can you tell us a bit more about that? How that
Yes.
ends up for sounds like
Yes.
it doesn't sound like a good thing.
I know. Generally speaking, Harvey, if we can keep the government out of our affairs, it's far better for everybody, generally speaking. But we, as citizens of all kinds of, various jurisdictions across Canada and in different parts of the world too, if we do nothing, then the default rules of that jurisdiction applies, such as upon a divorce or a
Mm,
breakup of a business ownership or a death. But if we are proactive and we learn about what our options are and what paperwork or what rules apply for our jurisdiction, and we do the proactive planning, well, then we have more say in what takes place.
okay.
And that would apply to a prenuptial agreement of a couple getting together based on their unique situation. And it
Mhm.
involves at the time of a death too. If we don't have a will, jurisdictional rules apply.
Yeah, yeah. So you want to keep the government out of your funds. You want to have a will in place.
Amen.
Um, a lot of people have heard the term living will or powers of attorney. Um, can you give us some insight as to what that means and how it's different from the wills that we just talked about?
Yes, yes. Well, let me mention the fact that, first of all, Harvey, generally speaking, in this country of Canada, less than half of the adult population has a valid will. And
Wow.
many of those that have a valid will, so many of those are so out of date that when the death does occur, it's going to cause problems for the surviving family members.
Hmm. Yeah.
But more importantly, far fewer adult Canadians have a medical directive in place. And that medical directive is commonly known as a power of attorney.
Right.
And it's basically just the document nominates typically a close friend or a relative to stand up for you if you're incapacitated to make those decisions on your behalf. It's not nominating an attorney as a lawyer. It's nominating someone that you have faith and trust in who will speak up for you at a very, very difficult time.
Right.
The Canadian Hospice and Palliative Care Association that I've done some work for has been promoting over the last few years Advanced Care Planning Day, which was most recently on April 16th of this year,
Hmm.
2025. And the whole mandate of this initiative across Canada is to really get people thinking that if they're incapacitated, who's going to speak on their behalf? I believe
Yeah.
their tagline is, if not you, who? And it's a very compelling message, but more people need to lean into this as well.
Yeah, it's a really important thing to have in place. And in the industry that I work in, the home healthcare, where we're helping people, generally seniors, we see so many people that don't have um, a power of attorney in place. And then it can get a little bit complicated because um, people's mental capacity might not be what it used to be. Perhaps they're suffering from Alzheimer's or living with Alzheimer's or dementia. Um, and then it becomes questionable, right? So it's always good to have that established early on and have somebody, a family member or a close friend that you really trust, like you said, to be able to speak for you if you can.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Actually, it surprised me as I was writing my book, Harvey, that during the COVID pandemic, I had read some material, and I mentioned it in my book, that a fair number of people, when they were taken to the hospital, couldn't communicate because they couldn't breathe.
Oh,
So this
right.
dilemma came up, with the lack of ventilators and everything, all the chaos that took place during the
Mm,
pandemic. But I didn't realize that because I'm not in the healthcare field. But this was
yeah.
from a nurse, I believe it was, or a doctor who had shared this in the article that a lot of people just couldn't communicate because of that particular reason alone.
Wow. Yeah, I would never thought of that, but that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Hmm.
it does. And having a power of attorney in place is rather simple to do. And there's a lot of great information out there from all kinds of sources now, but it really comes back to speaking with those that we love and care about and moving in that direction.
Yeah. And who would help somebody to put that in place? Is there just a website that they would go to, or Is it something that you would speak to with your lawyer about?
Yes, both.
Right.
Many lawyers now, when they're helping people to set up their will, they're quite often bringing up the fact that these people should be having a power of attorney in place too. And there's two aspects to that here in Ontario anyway, one for personal care and one for property.
Yeah.
But we can all be in essence more knowledgeable by researching things online these days, but it's important to make sure that people are getting the information from a good solid source. But yes, researching it online first would, I think, be a good logical step.
Okay. Yeah, we suggest the same. We often tell folks that you have to have these things in place early on, as early as you can, and then there's always the question of when does the power of attorney kick in? When is it active? Is there any light you can shed on that for us as well, Greg?
Yes. As humans, in my opinion, Harvey, we all crave control. We were eager to get control of our lives as young children, and I'm sure many of us drove our parents crazy with wanting that control and fighting over it as youngsters. But all through our lives, we want to maintain that control. And even to the very, very end, having that control for us is vitally important. But even as our mind starts to age, and as you said, dementia quite often can creep into our lives and such, many of us will be in a situation where we will not have as much control as we would like. And that's where it's
Mhm.
vitally important to have had these conversations long before that happens, and we don't know when it will happen, but to have a trusted person be able to be in a position as our power of attorney to speak up for us if we can no longer make those decisions ourselves, and especially with our health care and our finances too. It's important to have both in place.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent advice. Um, it's a powerful message that you're sending out. And do you think it's being accepted and people are coming around? I know it's a very difficult topic for a lot of people to even embrace initially, but having something like your book out there to give people some better insight, are you seeing some progress in that?
I am, yes. And I knew this would be a tough message to put together, Harvey. I wrestled with this for a long time before I even created the book. But I took some advice of a very famous author who was actually a dragon for 3 seasons, and he suggested that I recruit people from my target market. And I did that. And they were just people, they were not from the funeral or financial industry, but they had seen situations that they wanted to share and help other people. And it's resulted in a fairly solid book. But this whole message now, especially through the LinkedIn platform, has resulted in over 9,000 people following me.
Wow, that's excellent. That's excellent. I'm going to touch on a very sensitive topic, medical assistance in dying. So the MAID program. Um, how does that affect everything that I know that's a whole topic on itself, which we can maybe address on another time. But have you seen that increasing over the last few years, and how does that affect this whole progress or process of having your wills and all your power of attorney and all your documents in order?
Well, it really comes back to this whole issue, Harvey, of control. Since 2016, when medical assistance in dying became legal in Canada, over the years since then, the number of Canadians opting to end their life through that program has been increasing, and I think it will continue to do so. But again, it comes back to people wanting that control. If they're living with a irremediable and grievous condition, I think is the terminology they use, and they qualify for MAID, and there's a quite a stringent application process in which people have to go through and be approved by more than one doctor.
Mhm.
It's again something that people want to be able to make that choice and have that control over the final chapter of their life if they feel that that is truly in their best interest. And I think we will see more and more of this. And yes, it is very controversial, but it's now being used and legal in many other parts of the world as well.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, it's a touchy subject for sure, and it's something that's out there. It's real. We've seen it a few times already with some of our clients in the past, and yeah, it's like I said, that's a whole topic in itself. We can talk about that another day. Um, just thinking back to when I read your book for the first time, it mentioned a lot about building your legacy as well. And I like that. I think that means something different for from one person to the next. Everybody has a different um, legacy that they want to have or how they want to be remembered. Can you tell me a bit more about that and how people can um, start that process, I guess.
Yes. Well, I think, Harvey, that we are all generally leaving a part of our legacy in all of our everyday dealings with those that we communicate with and our family and how we treat other people generally. But I understand and respect the fact that not everyone can afford a financial advisor and a lawyer. And certainly very few people can afford to have their name put on a hospital wing. But we can
Mhm,
all learn more about how we can actually have a greater impact when we're ultimately here no longer.
mhm,
And one of the ways that people can do that very cost effectively is by speaking with a financial advisor about legacy planning. And that's one of the things that I've helped many clients with over the years. And it can be a very cost effective way and practical way of actually leveraging what we have today to make a bigger impact tomorrow. And there are a number of financial strategies to do that. But generally speaking, after someone dies, the opportunities for planning in that sense go out the window. The
sure.
time to be thinking and planning, and again, it comes back to being proactive.
Okay. That's a lot of great information, Greg. I'd like to lighten it up a little and just ask you if to share maybe a story of something unusual that you've seen along the way that might bring a little chuckle to the air.
Okay. Well, as you can imagine, it would be from the funeral industry, not the financial planning industry, because of
Sure.
as you're meeting with clients to talk about their retirement and such, that's pretty straightforward. But the funeral industry has always been a curious one for a lot of people, and that's what compelled me to become a funeral director at a young age when we were going to school together and trying to decide what we wanted to do. And by the way, it was my guidance counselor in grade 13 who had suggested it.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, yes, and I get asked this in interviews occasionally, but one of the more interesting things that I had seen back in the 80s, and I hadn't seen it since actually, was a woman had died standing up, believe it or not. And I had only seen this one time, but my coworker and I were called to an apartment building, and we were warned when we went in that this was a little unusual. And sure enough, the older woman was in her kitchen. She was standing up in the corner with her shoulders back towards the corner and her head drooped over.
Oh my.
But from what the coroner had told us, she had bad arthritis and her knees had locked. And there she was, just gently standing in the corner, and I've never seen it since.
Wow. Well, if she was Irish, she'd be ready for the wake.
Exactly.
There you go. Um, are there any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners? Um, I know there's a great message. We talked a little bit about communication, wills, executors, powers of attorney. Wrapping it all up, what would you say is your message to folks?
Well, I heard someone else say this recently, Harvey, and I think it rings very true in all these aspects that we've been discussing. But for many of us, I think for the vast majority of the population, it always seems too early to talk about death until it's too late. And I've been on
Mm,
the front lines. I've worked with the large and small funeral homes and forensics departments and police, etc., coroners, and I have seen it so many times. Life can
yeah,
change like that. And I've met
yeah,
many people who have died who I'm sure have some serious regrets that they did not do the planning when they should have. But really what I stress to people is to plan while you can.
yeah. That's a great message. It can happen to anybody, even young bucks like us.
That's right.
Great message, Greg. I appreciate your time today. I think we've covered a lot. I have a ton of other questions that I could ask, but I think we'll try and arrange another meeting, another fireside chat, or I guess
Yes.
I guess I should call it a riverside chat based on the picture that's behind me.
Yes, fair enough. And by the way, Harvey, I should mention that people can find my book and my backstory and such on my website, do not ignore your mortality.com. And there are also resources there where people can actually download conversation starters with a list of curated questions where people can print that off and use it with their family members to get these conversations moving in a more meaningful way.
That's awesome. So this is what the book looks like. I've got I've got the autograph version myself. But I would strongly advise everybody to look for the book, have a read. It's got some great information, and you won't regret it. And there's some dark humor along the way as well.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Harvey.
Greg. All right, appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.